Tonight, we journey not into the realm of folklore or fiction, but to a place where a real monster once walked, leaving behind a blood-soaked legacy that chills the soul to this day. We travel to a small, unassuming house where the whispers of the dead still echo through the halls, telling a story of unimaginable horror. This is the true, unsolved tale of the Villisca Axe Murder House, a place forever scarred by a night of brutal, inexplicable violence. Imagine the town of Villisca, Iowa, in the early summer of 1912. It was the quintessential American dreamscape, a peaceful community of tree-lined streets and quaint wooden homes with white picket fences. Neighbors knew each other by name. Children played freely in green yards, and crime was something one only read about in newspapers from distant, sprawling cities. In Villisca, people felt so safe that they often went to bed without even locking their doors. This profound trust, this comforting illusion of safety, is precisely what made the impending tragedy all the more terrifying. On the evening of Sunday, June 9th, 1912, the town's Presbyterian church was alive with cheerful activity. It was the annual Children's Day program, an event organized with great care by one of the community's most beloved figures, a woman named Sarah Moore. Her efforts had made the evening a wonderful success for all the local families. The Moore family was the very picture of idyllic rural life. The patriarch, 43-year-old Josiah Moore, was a respected and successful businessman, a pillar of the community. His wife, Sarah, aged 39, was a devoted mother and a vibrant social presence at the church. Together, they were raising 4 beautiful children: 11-year-old Herman, 10-year-old Catherine, 7-year-old Boyd, and the youngest, 5-year-old Paul, all living together in a modest but warm 2-story home at 508 East 2nd Street. After the successful church program concluded, Sarah extended a kind invitation to 2 young neighborhood girls, Lena Stillinger, aged 12, and her sister Renee, aged 8. The girls were friends of the Moore children and, caught up in the evening's excitement, eagerly accepted the offer to spend the night. No one could have possibly imagined that this simple act of hospitality would become a death sentence for the 2 innocent visitors. Sometime after 9:30 p.m., the Moore family, accompanied by their 2 young guests, walked home under the soft glow of the moon. The sound of their laughter and cheerful chatter echoed down the quiet street, the last vestiges of life and happiness before an eternal silence would fall upon them. They arrived home, perhaps shared a small late-night snack, and then, one by one, retired for the night, blissfully unaware of the pure evil that was waiting as darkness enveloped Villisca, and the town drifted into a peaceful slumber. A living nightmare was just beginning inside the Moore residence. 8 souls, 6 of them innocent children, fell asleep within the supposed safety of their own home, having no idea that a malevolent shadow was already among them, patiently waiting for the moment they were most vulnerable, waiting for the house to fall completely silent before beginning its monstrous work. The sun rose on the morning of June 10th, casting its warm summer light across the town, but an unnatural stillness hung over the Moore house on East 2nd Street. Mary Peckham, their next-door neighbor, was the first to sense that something was deeply wrong. An early riser, she was accustomed to hearing the sounds of the Moore children getting ready for their day. But that morning, the house was eerily silent, and all its windows were strangely covered. Mrs. Peckham grew increasingly anxious as the morning wore on. She went about her chores, repeatedly glancing over at the silent house, but saw no signs of life. By 7:30 a.m., her concern had turned to dread. Unable to wait any longer, she walked over to the Moore's front porch and knocked firmly on the door, expecting to hear the familiar sounds of a family waking up. The silence that answered was absolute and unnerving. She knocked again, louder this time, calling out their names. Still nothing. She tried the doorknob, only to find it securely locked. A cold knot of fear tightened in her stomach. Every door and window was sealed from the inside. This was not just a family sleeping in late. This was something terribly, fundamentally wrong. Her instincts screamed that a tragedy had unfolded behind that locked door. Overcome with a sense of foreboding, Mary Peckham immediately called Josiah's brother, Ross Moore. He arrived quickly, sharing her alarm. Ross circled the house, shouting for his brother and his family. But his calls were swallowed by the same deadening silence. With no other option, Ross used his own set of keys to unlock the front door, pushing it open into the darkness within, completely unprepared for the horror that awaited him. The first thing that struck him was not a sight, but a feeling. The air inside was thick, stagnant, and heavy. The house was unnaturally dark, as every blind had been drawn. And in a bizarre and unsettling detail, every mirror and reflective surface had been carefully covered with cloth. Ross called out his brother's name one last time, his voice trembling in the oppressive quiet, before cautiously stepping further into the gloom. He made his way toward the downstairs bedroom, the one belonging to his brother Josiah and his wife Sarah. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the covered windows, he saw the shape on the bed. It was a sight that would haunt his nightmares for for the rest of his life. Lying beneath a crimson-soaked blanket were two still figures. Their faces, or what was left of them, had been bludgeoned into an unrecognizable pulp of flesh and bone. Ross Moore staggered backward, a wave of nausea and pure horror washing over him. He stumbled out of the house, gasping for air, and yelled for Mary Peckham to call the town marshal immediately. He couldn't bring himself to go upstairs. He knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty born from the absolute silence, that the carnage in the downstairs bedroom was only the beginning of the nightmare concealed within the house. Town Marshal Hank Horton arrived shortly after, and a formal search of the house began. With each door that was opened, another layer of hell was revealed. Upstairs, in the children's room, the investigators found the 4 more children in their beds: Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. All of them were dead, their small skulls crushed by the same savage, repeated blows that had killed their parents. Then they entered the guest room and found the bodies of the 2 visiting girls, Lena and Anae Stillinger. They had met the same ghastly fate. The scene here was even more disturbing. Lena's body had been positioned in a peculiar, almost ritualistic way, and her nightgown was pushed up, suggesting a possible sexual assault. A final act of depravity inflicted by the killer. 8 bodies in total, 2 adults and 6 children, all brutally murdered in their sleep with a single weapon, an axe. The investigators found the murder weapon leaning against a wall in the guest room where the Stillinger girls lay. It was still slick with blood and hair. In a final, chilling twist, they discovered that the axe belonged to Josiah Moore himself. The killer had found it in the family's woodshed. Beyond the massacre, the crime scene was littered with bizarre and cryptic clues that baffled law enforcement. The fact that every mirror had been covered suggested the killer either couldn't bear to see his own reflection after his heinous act, or was following some dark, superstitious ritual, perhaps believing the souls of the dead could be trapped in the glass. This act added a layer of supernatural dread to the already horrific scene. In the kitchen, investigators found a bowl of bloody water, indicating the killer had calmly washed his hands after the slaughter. Beside it was a plate of uneaten food, as if he had paused for a meal. This casual, almost domestic behavior in the immediate aftermath of such incredible violence pointed to a mind that was terrifyingly detached from reality. A psychopath of the highest order. More strange evidence was found in the parents' bedroom. A 2-pound slab of uncooked bacon was leaning against the wall. A detail so random and illogical it defied explanation, and perhaps most unnervingly, All the doors had been locked from the inside. How had the killer entered? And more mysteriously, how had he exited? The terrifying possibility arose that he had been hiding in the house all along, waiting. News of the Villisca Axe murders spread like a contagion of fear. The town's idyllic peace was shattered into a million pieces. A palpable terror gripped every household, and no one dared to sleep without their doors bolted and weapons close at hand. Friendly neighbors now looked at each other with suspicion and fear. The monster could be anyone, and the realization that he had walked among them turned their paradise into a living hell. The official investigation that followed was, by modern standards, a chaotic failure. In 1912, forensic science was in its infancy. Worse, the crime scene was almost immediately compromised. Hundreds of curious townspeople, driven by shock and morbid curiosity, trampled through the house, touching everything and inadvertently destroying what little evidence might have been left behind by the killer. A list of suspects soon emerged, each adding another layer of intrigue and darkness to the case. The first was State Senator Frank F. Jones, a powerful and influential figure in Villisca. Jones was a bitter business rival of Josiah Moore, who had previously worked for Jones before starting his own competing farm implement company and luring away significant business. Their animosity was common knowledge throughout the town. Rumors also circulated of a more personal motive. It was whispered that Josiah Moore had been engaged in an affair with Jones's daughter-in-law, providing Jones with a powerful reason to seek revenge for his family's honor. Despite the strong motives, Jones had a solid alibi, and his political power made him a difficult suspect to pursue. Though many believed he may have hired someone to carry out the brutal murders, this theory of a hired killer led investigators to another prime suspect, William Blackie Mansfield. Mansfield was a suspected serial killer and professional hitman, believed to be responsible for a string of similar axe murders in nearby states, both before and after the Villisca massacre. His method, or modus operandi, matched the crime perfectly. From the weapon of choice to the covering of the victims' faces, he was a terrifying and plausible candidate. An even more disturbing and bizarre suspect was a traveling minister named Reverend George Kelly. The eccentric English preacher was in Villisca on the night of the murders. Having attended the very same Children's Day program as the Moore family, he left town on an early morning train the next day. Just as the bodies were being discovered, Kelly had a history of mental illness and had been accused of being a peeping Tom. Years after the murders, during an interrogation for an unrelated crime, Reverend Kelly suddenly confessed to the entire Villisca slaughter in chilling detail. He claimed he had received a vision from God, a divine command to slay utterly and sacrifice the children. His confession was disturbingly specific, describing how he waited in the shadows and carried out the attacks. But his mental instability cast doubt on his story. When brought to trial, however, Kelly recanted his entire confession, insisting he had been coerced by the police. After 2 separate trials and a hung jury, he was ultimately acquitted. The question of his guilt remains one of the case's most haunting aspects. Was he a mentally ill man manipulated into a false confession, or a cunning, demonic killer who managed to escape justice? Over the years, countless other theories have been proposed, from an unknown transient passing through on a freight train to a local resident with a hidden, violent grudge. But every lead went cold, and every suspect had an alibi or was acquitted due to lack of evidence. The Villisca Axe murders officially became one of America's most infamous unsolved mysteries. A brutal crime with no justice for its 8 victims. While the legal case grew cold, a new and more terrifying chapter of the story began to unfold. The house at 508 East 2nd Street, the silent witness to the massacre, refused to let the world forget. It became a focal point for the pain, terror, and rage of the spirits that were violently ripped from their lives that night. The house itself seemed to absorb the tragedy, transforming from a crime scene into a place of active, malevolent haunting. Over the decades, the house passed through the hands of several owners, but none could stay for long. Every family that tried to live within its walls reported a barrage of inexplicable and frightening phenomena. They spoke of hearing the distinct sounds of children weeping in the dead of night, followed by disembodied, ghostly giggles that would echo from empty rooms, a chilling remnant of the lives that were cut short. The phantom sounds of a child's toy ball could often be heard bouncing in the attic, the very space where the more children once played. Doors would slam shut with violent force. Objects would slide off shelves, and ladders would inexplicably fall over. Residents felt a constant, oppressive sensation of being watched by unseen eyes, their every move scrutinized by the spectral inhabitants of the home. Paranormal investigators who have studied the house have captured compelling evidence of its haunting. Using digital recorders, they have documented numerous electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs. In the static, faint, whispered voices can be heard. A child's voice clearly says, "Get out," while another seems to plead, "Let me go." Spectral pleas from souls trapped in an eternal nightmare. Today, the the Villisca Axe Murder House has been preserved and operates as a dark tourist destination. Visitors can take historical tour during the day. But for the truly brave, the house is available for overnight stays. It is from these overnight vigils that the most terrifying modern accounts of paranormal activity have emerged, confirming that the entities within are far from peaceful. Guests who have spent the night report a host of harrowing experiences. They have felt the icy touch of invisible hands on their skin, had their blankets violently pulled off them as they tried to sleep, and been awakened by the heavy, deliberate sound of footsteps pacing on the floor above them. Some even claim to have heard the distinct, horrifying sound of an axe being dragged slowly across the old wooden floors. The closet in the children's bedroom is considered a major spiritual hotspot. Numerous visitors have witnessed its door creak open on its own, and many report an overwhelming feeling that someone is hiding inside, peering out at them through the darkness. It's a focal point of childlike energy, a mixture of playful curiosity and profound sadness that leaves a lasting impression on all who experience it. Perhaps the most shocking event in the house's recent history occurred in November 2014. A paranormal investigator named Robert Lawson Jr., staying alone overnight, called 911 in the early morning hours. When police arrived, they found him with a self-inflicted stab wound to the chest. He claimed a malevolent entity in the house had attacked and possessed him, forcing him to turn the knife on himself in a terrifying paranormal assault. So, who was the monster who wielded the axe on that terrible night in 1912? Was it the vengeful business rival, Frank Jones? The cold-blooded serial killer, Blackie Mansfield? The disturbed and fanatical Reverend George Kelly? Or was it some unknown phantom, a nameless evil that drifted into town, committed an unspeakable act, and vanished back into the darkness forever? We will likely never have a definitive answer. More than a century has passed, and the killer, whoever he was, has long since taken his dark secret to the grave. His identity is lost to history, but the horrific legacy he created endures. It lives on in the fearful whispers of a town that forever lost its innocence, and in the chilling tales told by those who dare to step inside his house of horrors. Above all, that legacy lives within the silent, watchful walls of the home at 508 East 2nd Street. It is more than just a house. It is a tombstone for an entire family. The agony and violence of that night have seeped into its very foundation. It is a place where 8 souls are said to be trapped, forever replaying their final moments, forever waiting for a justice that will never arrive. The Villisca Axe Murder House stands as a grim and potent reminder that true evil exists. It can hide in the most peaceful of places, behind the most ordinary of facades, waiting for an opportunity to strike. It serves as a warning that sometimes the greatest horrors are not creatures of fiction, but are born from the darkness that resides within the human heart, a darkness that can turn a peaceful home into a slaughterhouse overnight.